The secret societies that rule the world have some ancient knowledge they've kept secret for a long, long time. I've discovered it, and I want to share it with you so we can use it to fight back against them. What I'm going to share with you is called the 7 Hermetic Principles. It's from a book called The Kabbalion. It traces its roots back to Egyptian and Greek knowledge that was hidden in secret societies. I want to go over the 7 principles and then how they're being used against us by the New World Order. And then last, I'm going to show how we can use them ourselves to defeat the New World Order. So the 7 Hermetic Principles. The first one's mentalism. This is the idea that the universe is mental in nature. This is basically an early version of the holographic universe theory or the law of attraction. 2, theory of the principle of correspondence, as above, so below. This is the theory that our mind can tap into the ether, and so that things that we think about and things that happen in the world, in the universe, they send out a signal through this ether, kind of like throwing a stone into water and it causes ripples. The ether, you can think of it as kind of like a liquid. It goes through all matter. It's so small. It's like a sea of particles that are so small that they go right through all solid matter. But they still have a vibration that affects energy. And so our thoughts and our actions reverberate through the universe, and they're able to be picked up by other people. 3 is the principle of vibration. Everything vibrates. A good demonstration of this is if you took an iron rod and you vibrated it at a slow speed. At first you couldn't hear anything, but then as it vibrated faster, you'd be able to hear the noise from the rattling of the iron bar. And then as it got faster, it would begin to heat up, and then you could see light emanating from it. And then as it vibrated faster, it would start heating up, and then you could feel heat coming off of it. And then eventually it would vibrate so fast that it would start sending out rays of energy, and then it would disintegrate and become gaseous. 4, the principle of polarity. This is the principle that everything has 2 poles. If you think about a lot of things, there's nowhere where you can really separate things. Like, for example, hot and cold. Where can you find the difference between hot and cold? They're just different degrees of the same thing. So things that may seem opposite are actually the same thing, but in different degrees. 5, the principle of rhythm. This is the principle that things move in cycles, where they go towards one end of polarity and then back to the other end of polarity. And also, recurring actions create a rhythm that sets a pattern. Like, for example, if you think about the same things all the time, or if you do the same actions all the time, it becomes stuck in a rhythm that you get almost hypnotized by. Number 6, cause and effect. For every cause, there's opposite effect. That one's pretty self-explanatory. 7 is gender. All things, this doesn't just apply to sex. All things have gender aspects within them. like the yin and yang principle, male and female, positive and negative. So how the New World Order how are they using these 7 principles? First one, mentalism. They long ago created a plan to systematically take over the world. And by focusing on this plan for hundreds of years, they're putting the power of manifestation behind it by focusing on it and every day working towards that goal. They've also, by sharing this plan with their group, they create mental imagery power of focusing on what the end goal is, and then they can see actions that need to be done to create this, to make it become a reality. Correspondence. Number 2. They use the media to spread fear and hate, to create divisions, and this creates a ripple effect through the principle of correspondence. As more and more people see these messages of fear or hate, it spreads to the whole population and makes people easier to control. They can be steered in whichever direction. Number 3, vibration. They use education and debase the media to dumb people down, to lower their vibrational state. They use mass poisoning of water through fluoride and drugging people. 70% of the American population are on prescription drugs. They debase religion by removing the Godhead principle, and the principle of spirit, the principle that within us we have this power and that we're all connected, we're all interconnected. By removing this, they make us blind and lower our vibration levels to make us easier to manipulate and control. For polarity, they use the theory of polarity to divide and conquer. They divide us. They set races against each other, different classes against each other. You see this a lot with politicians. They even divide the sexes against each other. You see that a lot in socialist propaganda, where they use class warfare to make people divided. 5, rhythm. They create economic booms and busts and political swings. So they run the Fed, so they control the money supply and the interest rates. So they create cycles of booms and busts where they can, during busts, they can buy up property and businesses cheaper. They use political swings for their advantage. They know that every couple generations the political climate swings the opposite way. So whichever part of their agenda suits the political climate better, they use to push that forward more. For example, if people are swinging towards more of a socialist mindset, they use that to get in more government controls, to take over more aspects of economic life through the government. And then during periods of more conservative, when it swings to the right, they use that for more nationalist war-mongering policies. Number 6, cause and effect. They create false flag attacks and then use the outrage and swell of patriotism, to use that to attack their other enemies. They use economic warfare to make large groups of poor people that they can enlist to attack their enemies in the rich class. Number 7, gender. They appeal to the kind side of people, the feminine side of people, in order to gain hate for their enemies. Again, this goes back to class warfare, discrediting people, attacking people by appealing to people's sense of justice. They use this to get more laws to protect the underprivileged, such as welfare laws or help for foreign aid for other countries. I'm not saying this is bad, it's just that when it's involuntary and when they have to take a bunch of money and institute new laws to create these things, then they're able to gain more power through it. Now, how can we use these 7 principles against them? 1, mentalism. We need to visualize what their downfall would look like, what steps need to be made in order to create a more free society, what actions we can take to speed up bringing them down. We need to visualize how our new system would work and keep our mind focused on that end result. 2, correspondence. Give people the feeling and the idea that the government isn't so in control that it's unreversible, that it's hopeless to fight back, that this system can never be changed because they're so powerful. We want to instill the feeling of victory and the feeling of hope into people so that they don't see it as fruitless to fight back against the system. And by them having that feeling and sharing that feeling with others, it'll spread through the population so that people are more likely to take steps to make it a reality. Number 3, vibration. This goes right along with that last question. By spreading the feeling of victory and freedom, the potential for a better system, it will raise people's vibration out of that of one of passivity to one of activity, so that people will become more active in fighting back against the system. People need to not feel powerless. They need to feel like they're in control of their own lives, that they can change the system, that the system's not always been like that, that it's always that there's no hope in it. You see a lot with people voting. People won't vote for a third party because they think it's a waste of time, or a lot of people don't vote at all because they think it's a waste of time. That's the very mindset that we have to address, that people change from that thinking into instead of being passive, that they're more active in creating a change. For polarity, we need to use the repulsion of how bad the government is and the injustices that they do to drive people away from them to us, to the outside of liberty and to revolution. Expose the bad things in the government, and so that people will be pushed away from that and drawn towards the opposite, more liberty. 5, rhythm. We need to use the times, the swings, when they swing the economic system up and down, and then the changes in politics go from right to left or left to right. Use whichever system is, make use of the current climate, and also use the prevailing trends in the youth to tailor your message to them so that it's more receptible. So for example, in Bad Economic Times show, they do the same thing. You can see how their policies created the economic downturn, and then they used it to attack their enemies and get more laws passed by blaming the rich and by pointing out the disparity between the rich and the poor, and by showing how people are lacking in health care and things like that. They use it to their advantage. So we need to do the same thing. We need to reveal what policies they had that created these economic conditions, such as, for example, the housing bubble. It was government-backed loans and policies which made the banks lend to people who couldn't afford the houses, which created the bubble, which made the housing market burst, and people were stuck with all these derivatives. The banks were stuck with them. They used their leverage on the government to get the government to bail them out. In times of war, show how the government is pro-war and how they profit from war, and show the effects on soldiers and people in other countries that we bomb and pollute the lands with depleted uranium bullets, which cause birth defects. So we want to cause a repulsion away from government tyranny towards the side of liberty. Cause and effect. A lot of these they're interrelated. They're almost different aspects of all the same principle. It all really comes down to polarity. They're all different aspects of it. But cause and effect. When the government does something that takes away people's rights or causes harm to people, we need to expose it so that it'll create an opposite reaction effect to people coming over to the side of libertarianism. One thing about this that we need to educate people on is the hidden economic effects, because it's very easy for them to sell direct economic benefit in the form of direct payments like welfare payments, Social Security, healthcare, things like that. These are direct payments, so it's easy for them to show a benefit with that. But what people don't see is all the hidden reverberation effects that are caused by these. They don't see the fact that in order to pay for the programs, they have to take a lot more money than what they give out, and a lot of it's wasted. And by taking that money from businesses, it causes less jobs, which actually causes the same problems that they're trying to get rid of. The same problems they're trying to solve are actually they're contributing to by causing harm to the economic system. We can also use the cause and effect principle by provoking the government into being more dictatorship-like and more instituting more controls, and that in turn will cause another bounce back of people being more repulsed away from them. 7, gender. The way we can use gender is by appealing to the protection aspect of people wanting to protect their children or protecting future generations, or protect people's opportunities within our government, within our society by showing the government's threat to them, their love for those people will cause a opposite masculine energy to come in the form of aggressiveness in order to protect those they love. So show how, for example, government education deliberately dumbs down children. They deliberately get them on drugs like Ritalin. They've actually they were actually paying handouts to get more kids on Ritalin. The numbers of kids on Ritalin was just astronomical. And they create these fake disorders like attention deficit disorder. Of course, kids who have a lot of energy don't want to sit still in a classroom for hours and hours. They're not made to do that. They're not meant to do that. And so when they are fidgety or can't sit still, they're diagnosed with having ADHD and given drugs. Another way we could use this is showing, look at all the people who were killed and hurt in the recent wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I believe over 1 million children. And it was all over a fake pretense. They never did find any weapons of mass destruction. Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with 9/11. And 1 million kids died because of it. And thousands of US soldiers died, and thousands more came back missing limbs or eyes, or got blown up. So show the human aspect. Show people the real world effects of government. These principles, they're kind of sublime, and you have to take some thought to apply them. You have to study these principles and apply them specifically, because each one of them applies to so many different things and so many different aspects of life. And I mean, I'm just applying them to our specific task, that is, which is changing our government system. But these are very powerful principles. They use them all the time. If you look in the media, the way they use propaganda to manipulate people, you can see these principles in action. You can see it when they create fake revolutions, when they drum up support for wars, when they use false flag terror attacks. You can see these principles in action. They're very powerful, and we need to start using them on the side of good for once, since they've been used for a long time for evil. So if you'd like to read more, the book is called The Kabbalion.